Luis Peña, Violent Bob Ross, the guy that got done bad by the UFC and the whole MMA world, and he deserves justice. Hello and welcome to Bloodsport MMA.
Salam alaikum to everyone.
Luis Peña is a name that you might know if you're a big UFC fan, or might not know, but if you see his face, he most likely will look familiar to you because he has a very unique look. So he's called Violent Bob Ross because of he looks kind of like Bob Ross and violent because he's a UFC fighter or MMA fighter. I still believe to this day it's one of the best nicknames ever. And he has quite the story, and I am really unhappy that no one talks about that, so I thought it's important for me to talk about that and mention it. So I'll try to make it quick. Luis Peña, Violent Bob Ross, was on Series 27 of the Ultimate Fighter, as far as I remember, and got a contract there and was 5-3 in the UFC before he got released. So 5-3 in the UFC, normally a record that you don't get released for. It's not the best record, obviously, but the only 3 losses were against really good opponents. Trizano, Kama Worthy, and Matt Travola. These are 3 well-established UFC fighters. These are not just bombs, and he had some good wins as well. So what happened was, he had his last UFC fight in April of 2021, won by split decision, and the UFC was not thinking about releasing him. And then in summer of 2021, he got arrested for domestic abuse and some other charges. The other charges were dropped pretty quickly as far as I remember, but the domestic abuse and everything was still there. And obviously, that does not look good in the media at all. Especially if you're a man and there's a domestic abuse charge and you're a UFC fighter, it automatically is like, oh yeah, he's called Violent Bob Ross, he's violent, he probably hit his wife, blah, blah, I believe her, fire this scumbag. That's what was the whole reaction of the whole MMA world. And I remember it, when this happened, I was like, guys, if this is real, this is bad. But we don't know yet if it's real. We should never judge somebody or something because of an alleged thing where there's no evidence at all. Everybody can say, this guy did that to me, this guy did that to me. You need to have some proof. You can't just point with the finger at him. The UFC then, Dana White said, and I will read this quote, because the UFC released him, even though there were many fighters already that had problems with legal authorities and even with domestic abuse, and they didn't get released somehow. But yeah, the UFC released him immediately and said, Dana White said, well, I mean, this was a bad case. We knew that he had problems before that we were trying to help him with. This is a pretty nasty one. This one had to happen. Something like that could happen to anybody. Yeah, could happen to anybody. Well, you say it could happen to anybody. Why do you fire him immediately? I mean, I would understand it if you say, look, hey, we probably won't let you fight at the moment. We have to look how this whole thing plays out. Just stay on the sidelines. We'll maybe take you out of the roster, but you're still in UFC country. You're just not on the roster anymore. We don't want to look bad in the media, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I would understand that. But they just fired him. But then he got to fight in 2022, as far as I remember, after he got out of prison because there was no evidence and he just was at home and had to go to the court cases, whatever. So he could fight again. And then in 2022, he fought at Titan FC, which is an organization that is on UFC Fight Pass. So I thought, hey, nice, maybe the UFC had like kind of a talk with him and made it like this, that he can fight on a promotion on UFC Fight Pass, which is not that big, so it's kind of under the radar, a little bit of the press and everything. But he's still on UFC Fight Pass, so we can take him back immediately if the charges get dropped or something, or if it comes out that he's innocent, right? So he's still kind of on the roster in some way in regard, so he's in the UFC Fight Pass organization, he's still close to the company, we can sign him whenever we want. I felt like, okay, maybe if that's the case, that's nice. That's a good way to make it because he can still fight, but he's not fighting in the UFC. Okay. And then he won his fight there in like 49 seconds. He had a second fight at Titan FC that he also won. And then, I don't know why, he didn't fight at Titan FC anymore. He fought at XC MMA and some other organizations. And somehow he just, you know, it kind of happens sometimes when you get cut from the best organization where you did well, and you have all these negative things in your life going on. I mean, so many people were hating on him online and stuff. It can really mess with you. And I look at his Instagram all the time, I follow him closely, and you can clearly see he struggles with mental health a little bit. Because this is not easy. This is, especially if you haven't done anything, and you get accused of like domestic violence and stuff and cut, like you achieved your dream, you're in the UFC, you're at the place where you always wanted to be, and then you get cut for something you yourself know you have not even done, and the whole internet is hating on you and everybody's turning their back on you, your team is like going away from you, everything, you have no one anymore. This messes with you big time. And this will also be visible in your performances. So he then went on a 3-fight losing streak. I mean, he had a good record when he was in UFC. When he got out of the UFC, I think he was 9-2 or 9-3. No, I mean, he was not like a cannon. He was 28 when he got cut. It wasn't like he was 34 and the UFC was like, yeah, fuck this guy, we don't need him. He was 28. Now he's 30. And he's on a 3-fight losing streak, which obviously is pretty bad for him because now the UFC won't take him back. Like, you know what I mean? Even though I believe they should, because, and this is the reason why I do this video, July 5th, 2023, I quote his Instagram post, "Best birthday present I ever got, July 5th, 2023. 2 years later, the charges don't get null pros. They're completely dismissed. It's unfortunate. I lost so much over this injustice, but it is what it is at this point. But it feels good to finally get some justice. This is for all the people in my inbox and comments. All charges are dismissed." He did not do anything. So he's proven innocent. And what he meant with people in comments, and there's so many degenerate people that have zero pride, that never stepped into the cage one time in their life, that have like balls as big as fucking peanuts, and probably are in his inbox talking big like, I'll beat you up if I see you woman beater, blah, 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 talking all that shit to him. Can you imagine how that feels when you know you haven't done anything? Now you have some fucking peanut heads talking shit to you in your inbox, acting like you raped somebody or something. That messes with you big time, man. And I feel for this guy so much. I mean, yeah, he's on a 3-fight losing streak now. But we all know he's UFC caliber. He is UFC caliber, you can't deny that. He's 30 years old. In my opinion, there needs to be an organization now, UFC, Bellator, PFL, somebody needs to get him on a contract. He deserves to get a payday. He deserves to fight for real money. You don't get real money in these regional scenes. You don't get real money for that shit. And I see now he has a grappling match coming up and a kickboxing match coming up and stuff. But it's just so hard on this regional scene to even get fights. And then you sometimes fight young killers for like no money. And like, he deserves, in my opinion, in my opinion, the UFC should just sign him back. Not even because he's on a winning streak or something. He's on a losing streak, we can't deny that. But in my opinion, the UFC needs to make up for what they've done wrong. That this man just lost everything in those 2 years. Everything. And you were a big part of that, because if the UFC wouldn't cut him, the media wouldn't be talking about him like they talked about him. So I believe he deserves justice. He deserves something from the UFC, and I hope he gets a contract with Bellator, PFL, UFC, somewhere. He deserves to be in the big leagues. I know he can stand with those guys in the big leagues. I know he has the potential to do that. And if you're not a complete hater, you can only agree with that. I think it really helped him mentally as well. The charges were dismissed. And I can feel he's getting back into his real self. And I honestly believe that when he fights again, he will look like the violent Bob Ross we all know. So write in the comments, guys, what is your thoughts on that whole thing? What should the UFC do? Who should sign him? Write it all in the comments, guys. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and that you don't get cut from the UFC. Eat your fruits and eat your vegetables, guys. Until the next one, bye-bye.